r/ask Reddit. When did you realize you married the wrong person? Story 1. I almost did, and to be honest, there were a lot of red flags prior to this, but this was the catalyst. We've been dating 4 years, slated to be married in 8 months. I noticed he was making lots of likes and comments on Brittany's MySpace. Nothing huge or obvious. Then, not long after, he locked his phone. Hmm. But I managed to see he was also getting messages regularly from someone also named Brittany. I had suspected, but no proof now. I worked, swinged, and nights at the time. Came home early one night to him in our bed with you know who? Brittany. First thing this effer says when I walk in on them is, get this. There was no exchange of fluids. I promise, babe. Later, Brittany got a hold of me on MySpace. We met up. She had no idea I was even in the picture. We're still friends. I kicked him and his fluids out of my house. The inn. ETA, Brittany let me read all over their correspondence via MySpace and text. She was very upfront about not realizing he was with someone. I will admit Brittany was not exceptionally bright, but he had this thing all worked out. He stuffed all my stuff in a closet, even removed photos of us from the walls. I don't wear makeup, and at the time didn't own much stuff. We were poor. I was the only one working. He kept getting fired for harassment charges at work. Red flag, I know. He also kept the house dark while they watched a movie, then moved to the bed. Said it made it romantic. ETA 2. To clarify, I knew he sucked, and keeping a job, he kept getting let go. It wasn't until this show happened that I learned why he had been fired from previous jobs. I will freely admit, though, I was naive and ignorant. There were a lot of signs I should have noticed. First and foremost, how he actually met me. We worked in the same retail store, and he made a lot of advances and borderline lewd comments to get my attention. I didn't pay attention to the fact that he also did such said these things to other women I work with. I was only 18 when we met, not used to getting any attention from men, and had pretty crappy self esteem issues. And the 4 years we were together, I was honestly miserable. So miserable, I even committed myself once. I also thought he was the best I was getting. It was a really messed up 4 years of my life. Story 2. Got married, went on a honeymoon in China. We were both PhD students at the time. I was working class. Her family was middle class. Her father gave her $10,000 for the honeymoon. So we go to China to celebrate, and she wants to do some light pre dissertation research while there for a month or two. Fine. It turns out I spent the entire 2 months alone in tiny hostels while she did research, only spoke a few words of Mandarin, and I was a broke graduate student, so I couldn't really afford to slash didn't have the means to easily get to an airport to fly back home. Also had zero family support back home. Even if I did manage to make it home, I felt trapped. I talked to her about how the trip felt like a research trip and not like at all like a honeymoon. How I was all alone almost every day. We were sharing a laptop while on the trip. I was too poor to own a laptop, by the way, despite being in grad school. I opened the laptop one morning before she leaves to go survey a field site without me. Her email is open. She left a message open on the laptop. It's to her father, stating she wishes I wasn't there on the trip. Our honeymoon. Again, I was told this would be a honeymoon with slash maybe a slight detour for research. It turned out to be a research trip where I was a burden. She apologized. We stayed together for a few more years after she got sick and I became a caretaker. I wish, in hindsight, I had left China after reading that email. Story 3. Engaged, not quite married yet. When I had been on mandatory bed rest and caring for our infant son after having emergency surgery for nearly bleeding to death after a miscarriage, and he came home from work and looked me dead in the face and said, "Why aren't the effing dishes done?" Called my mom the next morning and told her I was leaving. Hightailed it out there in under 2 weeks. Comment 1. My mother tells that when she returned home from the hospital with me, my older sister was wearing a diaper that hadn't been changed in days, and the house was a mess. Before even asking to see the new baby, father asked what was for dinner. It took her a few years to get out, but she knew in that moment it was over. It was a good decision. He always was exactly the uncaring, inconsiderate, selfish, etc. Story 4. When she sat me down and with a straight face said, "I've thought about this and you're not going to exercise anymore." I was jogging a few miles a day and would usually bring kids within running stroller. She said, "You're a father and it's too time consuming." That's when I realized I made a terrible mistake. Catching her with another man in my car didn't help either, to stay married and all. Comment 1. Her take on this is so confusing. If you were bringing the kids with you on your runs, then what difference does it make if you're running versus doing some other activities? I'm curious if she ever gave you examples of what she thought you should be spending that time on instead of running. It was a control issue. She knew I was physically fit and enjoyed my runs with kids or bring them to the gym with me. She always had open invite to come for a jog or come to gym with us. She'd want me to watch a show or run errands with her or watch kids while she ran errands but not exercise. I really wasn't allowed to go out with friends, play a yearly round of golf or two, or anything like that. I also worked like a dog and a ton of overtime so she could stay at home and not work. This is another example of don't rush to get married if you have an unplanned pregnancy. Story 5. It was a death of 1,000 cuts. One of the first was when I realized she didn't trust me. We had been together around 10 years at this point, but I had a moment of clarity and literally said to her, "You don't trust me, do you?" Before she could answer, I said, "You don't trust anybody." And she agreed. She would routinely throw the kids out of the tub in the bathroom completely naked because they splashed her while getting a bath. And not just that, she would yell at the top of her lungs at how bad they were. The kids were around 2 to 4 at the time. God forbid the toddler splashes the water in the tub. Another time, I didn't even remember the cause, but I tried to play mediator, as in, "Okay, daughter, you did something wrong. Let's apologize to mommy." And she would. Then I asked mommy to apologize to our daughter. Mind you, she's like 2 or 4, for what her role was, and mom absolutely refused to apologize. I've known this lady more than 20 years, and I've never heard her apologize. Literally, never. The final straw was when one of our kids wanted a hug goodnight before bedtime. She locked herself in our bedroom and refused the hug because she had hugged them earlier in the day. Kids were crying. They didn't understand. I was devastated watching this unfold. Why doesn't mom want to hug me? I try my best to not let it impact me, but we share custody now, and I have to watch how she interacts with our kids. It's hard. The best consolidation is that the kids are getting older and they're starting to figure it out. Story 6. On my wedding day, we were married at her parents' house. a beautiful place on a private country club. The entire day was all about her, and she spent more time hanging out with her friend and getting drunk than with me. I stayed busy visiting with all the guests during the day. After all the guests left and it was down to her parents and me, I find her passed out drunk upstairs in a bedroom. Oh, I picked her up and carried her to our cars to take her home. Needless to say, our wedding night consisted of her sleeping it off. 5 years later, she went into inpatient treatment, and after she sobered up and was released, she told me that she didn't love me and wanted a divorce. Story 7. I figured it out after the fifth guy she slept with over 7 years of marriage. At least five I knew about anyway. Every time I thought it was me. I could be a better husband, more caring, more supportive, more anything she needed. If I could just be a better spouse, she would love me, and then everything would be right and we would be fine. Then it hit me. She doesn't love me. I was just never going to be someone she loved, no matter how good of a husband I was. So I told her I wanted a divorce and why. She didn't even cry. I moved out that week, filed for divorce, got an apartment, and moved on. Worked out for me though. I found a wonderful woman who does love me. We are happy and thriving together. We have been together for 15 years now. I'm just so happy. Story 8. When I came home from the ER after being diagnosed with a severe lung disorder, and she immediately left me with the kids so she could go out drinking with her friends, her exact words were, I need you to make them dinner. I'm running late to meet up with everyone. Comment 1. I feel you. A few years back, I had a 104-degree fever, passing in and out of consciousness, talking in my sleep, etc. I was bad. My now ex wife wakes me to ask if I'm okay and tells me that she's going to go shopping with her friend right now. We had a 5-year-old that she left in my care despite my state so she could go shopping? At 2 p.m., I finally managed to stay awake long enough to feed our child after the poor kid tried to wake me for the 20th time. He was also very excited about this Christmas kids party thing I promised him a week earlier I'd take him to. She could have taken him, but no, shopping. I managed to take a bunch of painkillers and anti inflammatory drugs, load up on sugars just enough to take him out because I felt so freaking bad for him that day. Anyway, I divorced her a couple years later. There was a lot wrong, but this one event is the one that sent me over the edge. Story 9. It was actually almost immediately after getting married. Our relationship had taken a nosedive as soon as we moved in together. But after we got married while we're in Greece on our honeymoon, he absolutely lost his mind on me in public. I had wanted to go see a beach on the island that is supposed to be one of the most beautiful in the world. So we tried to catch the bus, but it never came. He screamed at me, telling me he hated traveling with me and how could I ruin his vacation like this. Then we walked to the beach nearby and he went swimming with his two best friends, who he insisted come with us on the trip. I was too stunned and humiliated to do anything except sit on a beach chair and cry. Thank you guys so much. Subscribe if you want. If you don't want to, that's perfectly fine. All I need you to do is have a nice day and peace.